And with that said, we're gonna go ahead and we can get started. So I'm gonna brush this to the side. So we're actually gonna paint on our canvas first. We're gonna do the background and then we're gonna transfer our pattern. So to start, go ahead and grab some of your true blue and put a little bit of that onto your palette. And then also grab some of your wicker white and put some of that on your palette as well. And we are going to grab our our 3/4 inch flat brush and dip it in just a little bit of water to soften it. I don't want it to be sopping wet. And I'm going to pick up some true blue and some of my wicker white at the same time. So as you saw there, I just picked up true blue and then wicker white on the same brush. And we're going to start painting the background in a really loose, pretty textured pattern. And to do that, we're going to use tiny little brush strokes. So we're kind of going to be going in all different directions. Pick up a little blue and add it, pick up a little white and add it. And you can see I'm just going in all kinds of different directions. You really cannot mess this up. It's really fun. It's really loose. It's a really great way to add some texture to any background of any painting that you're doing. So we're going to do this over the whole painting. But we're going to keep in mind that we want sort of towards the center of our painting to be a little bit lighter. So to do that, we just want to make sure we include more white than blue in the center. So around the edges will be more blue than white, and in the center will be more white than blue. And I'll keep reminding you guys as we're going. So I'm picking up a little white and a little blue each time. I'm putting a little bit more blue around the border of our painting. And again, any random brush stroke, even a smaller brush will work for this. If you want to have sort of smaller strokes, that's fine too. This larger brush will just be a little bit quicker for us tonight. And if you guys are watching, let us know where you're watching from. Let us know if you guys are painting along or if you're watching for inspiration and maybe you're going to watch this playback later on and paint. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to pick up both colors as you go. We do want a little bit of white on the edges. Like I said, we want more blue than white, but we do want a little bit of white, and that's what gets the variety. If we did just blue, it would just all kind of be flat, even though we have those brush strokes. The white is what kind of makes it look different, makes the brush strokes sort of appear. I'm going to add a little more true blue. I just ran out. This is a really pretty color. It's kind of, like I said, you can use like a cobalt or something, but this one's kind of a unique blue color. I really like it.
Jesse, I think we might be having a little bit of some audio issues, so
Okay.
I'm going to have you maybe move your mic a little closer
Okay.
and see what happens.
No problem. How's that? Is that better?
I think it's better. I guess I will find out shortly.
Okay. Let us know if it's better, guys.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. It's the beauty of being live.
Exactly. You never know what's going to happen.
No, you don't. So, okay, so you can see I kind of left the middle open. Don't forget, we're going to keep doing the same thing in the middle, but I'm going to start adding more white towards the middle. So less blue and more white. And I'm going to just sort of keep blending it into sort of the outer area that we just painted. If you just went straight down, that's fine too. Just as long as you remember that we want more of the light blue in the middle. And the reason that is because if you look at the final image, which you should be able to see, you'll see that the robin is blue as well. So we don't want to have just the true blue with a true blue robin right on top of it because he would just totally disappear. So you want to make sure that background is light enough where that light or that blue robin really pops off of the background. And I'm just making sure that it's blended in. You can see I'm being really loose with it. You don't want too much paint. I feel like I've got a little bit of too much paint on my canvas here, so I just wiped some of it off with my brush. right, so you can make the brush strokes as big or as small as you want. You can make them even a little tighter if you prefer that texture. It's totally up to you. There's a lot of ways that you can personalize this painting. You could even do a different color background if you'd like. I just thought the blue was pretty for our little robin today. All right, so I'm just gonna touch it up a little more. I'm kind of looking at it and making sure I like it. And then once I've decided that I like it, I'm gonna add a little more white to make sure my robin doesn't disappear later on. Once I like it, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna hit it with my hair dryer. And if you're watching this video later, you can just go ahead and pause the video and let your painting dry before you move on to the next step. Just gonna make sure I've got enough white in my middle. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dry my painting now. Clean off my brush first, of course. Right, so I'm gonna grab the hair dryer. I wanna blow this away. And in case you're wondering, I always get asked this question. I put my hair dryer on the highest setting, and I switch between the hot and the cold setting. So I put it on the highest sort of air pressure, and then I have my little cool button here, so I kind of switch between hot and cold as I go. I feel like my paint is getting a little thick. Now that I'm drying it, I can kind of see that my paint is a little thicker than I want. So I'm just stopping really quick before I start drying too much of the paint. I'm sort of just kind of wiping some of it off with my brush. I just want to make sure I can get it dry sort of in a timely manner for you guys. I don't want you to have to sit here and watch me dry my painting all night. So just kind of wiping some of it away and still keeping that pattern. There we go. So now I'll hit it with the hairdryer again. Great, so that feels pretty dry to me. I always kind of touch it. If it feels cool to the touch, that usually means that there's some paint underneath the top layer that isn't dry yet, which I feel right here. So I'm actually going to hit it real quick again. Okay, that's good enough. All right, so now that we have our background painted, we're going to start thinking about the branch. So you can see in our final Rosy Robin painting that our cute little robin is sitting on a little branch there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start deciding where we want that branch placed. So depending on the size and shape of your canvas, you might want to place your branch differently. Like I said, this painting allows for a lot of personalization and to sort of change it up to whatever you prefer. So I have my little template cut out here, so I can kind of play around with where I want my robin to be sitting. Do I want him to be kind of low down here or right in the middle? It's totally up to you. That said, I'm going to kind of stick to my original composition, just the way you guys see it in the final picture. And I'm going to put him right about here. So I'm just going to kind of keep that there just so I can remember where I want to place my robin later on. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab some of my pure orange so we can start painting our branch. Put a little bit of that on my palette. And as you can see, I always try my best to keep the palette limited. I don't want to give you guys, you know, a million paints to have to buy to follow along with the painting. So that's what we'll do, some mixing. So I didn't feel like we needed a lot of brown, and I knew that we could easily mix brown using the colors that are in the rest of the painting. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to mix blue and orange together, and that's going to give us brown. And the reason it's going to give us brown is because these are complementary colors. So they're opposite each other on the color wheel, so when you mix them together, you're going to get a brown color. So here, I'll show you. I'll grab my true blue, and I'm using my number 1 liner brush, just in case I didn't say that. And some pure orange, we'll mix that together. Grab a little more pure orange. And as you can see, we're getting a nice, rich brown color. So see, perfect. So it's really easy to mix colors. You really need to know just a little bit about, you know, color theory. You don't need to know too much detail. But just really to have kind of a color wheel nearby always helps when you're painting. And you have to buy less paint that way too if you have knowledge of mixing colors. Alright, so we have a perfect brown here. So now that we've got that, like I said, we're going to kind of try to decide where we want our branch to be. So again, I have my number 1 liner brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of my brown, and I'm kind of going to leave my robin there just so I don't forget where I want him placed. And I'm going to start on the left, and I'm just going to very lightly draw a line. I'm not going to draw it too thick or too heavy yet, because I kind of just want to place it. So that way, if I do something weird or I want to change something immediately, I have time to wipe it away. So I'm going to start here on the end, and I want to make my branch look pretty organic. Of course, it's not just going to be a perfectly straight line. That's not really how nature is usually. So it's going to come down, and of course, you want your robin's feet to be on the branch. So make sure, I'm going to kind of go right underneath my robin here. Make sure that's kind of where I want it, so that'll be a great place for my robin to sit. And my branch is going to go kind of off of my painting. And then, of course, the painting is called Rosy Robin, so we're going to add some roses later. And so in order to do that, I want to have the opportunity to add as many roses as I want. So I'm going to add another little branch coming up off the side here, just to give me another little chance to paint some extra roses, because why not? So now what I'm going to do, now that I have my branch sort of sketched out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just thicken the branch with the same brush. So I still have my number 1 liner brush. I'm going to go from left to right, and I'm going to press down this time so I get a thicker line. Can you guys see how much thicker that line is from before? So before I was barely putting any pressure on my brush, and now I'm pressing down all the way to the canvas, and so I'm getting this nice thick line. And I'm using the same brush to do it, which is really nice. So that's just another thing that takes practice over time. If you're new to painting, brush control. So you'll start to learn what kind of lines and what kind of things you can do with different shapes and sizes of brushes. So I love a good round brush or a liner brush because you can do so many different things depending on how much pressure you apply. Do the same thing up here. And of course it's kind of going to be thicker at the base and then get thinner, just kind of how a branch is on a tree. And again, you don't want to see perfect, so you can even give your branch a little wiggle if you want, because that's kind of how it would be in nature. It wouldn't be perfectly straight. There'd be a little bit of irregularities in your branch. So there you go, super easy. Just pulled across, pressed down, and then started pulling up towards the end, and then added a couple little sprigs branching off of our branch. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to hit that with a dryer really quickly, just because we are going to transfer our pattern next, and I don't want to mess up my branch when I place the transfer paper down. I want to make sure that everything is sort of locked in place, and I don't want to mess up anything we've already done. So that said, I'm going to hit it with my hair dryer. Alright, so that feels pretty dry. Okay, so I'm going to grab my template and my transfer paper. So again, I have the kind that we make here at Plaid. This is Folk Art brand transfer paper, but whatever you have at home. A little trick, if you don't have any transfer paper, what you can do is take a graphite pencil and cover the whole back of your design with graphite, and it kind of turns your template into transfer paper itself. So when you go to press down on it, that graphite from the back will transfer wherever you press down. If you don't have graphite, you can use just regular chalk. If you have like a chalkboard at home, put some white chalk on there and it'll work the same way. Okay, so that's it. I'm gonna grab a tiny piece of tape just so my transfer paper doesn't move around too much. I'm gonna make sure I have my little robin where I want it. So I guess we want them about there. So I'm gonna tape down my transfer paper and then I'm gonna tape down my little robin template. So what you need to transfer it now is you can use a ballpoint pen to go over the lines or a stylus, but if you don't have either one of those handy, you can just use the end of your brush. So this is just my #1 liner brush, and I'm going to use the back of it because you don't need ink or anything. All you need is the pressure, and that is what transfers the lines. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press down. You can kind of flip it up and make sure you're getting everything you need. Press down and make sure I get all those little details in. I want to make sure I get the eye placed just so I know where all of those things are later to save us time so we don't have to redraw them. And I'm just pressing down. I'm putting a good amount of pressure. You don't need to, press down too hard. You don't want to break your canvas. But you do want to put a fair amount of pressure so that way you want to make sure the line is transferring to your canvas. I'm going to make sure you get every line. I'm going to make sure I get my little feet here and my tail. And again, I'm just following the line. And you can kind of, since we have it taped down, we can kind of check and make sure that all of our lines were transferred. Make sure we haven't missed anything. Okay, so it looks like it transferred pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my template off and take my transfer paper off. Oop, and get my tape off. Just stuck right on there. There we go. All right, so it's kind of hard for you guys to see. I'll hold it up closer, but it did transfer on there. So I'm just going to go ahead and you don't have to do this at home because I can see this really well in person, but it is a little tricky to see on camera. So I'm just going to grab my liner brush real quick and just fill it in with a little bit of white. I'm just going to go over those lines. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing. So at home, if you can see yours, just ignore this step. You don't need to worry about it. I just want to make sure you guys can see what I'm doing for the rest of the painting. So I'm just going to kind of paint in some of those little lines that you guys maybe can't see on my canvas. Because they are pretty subtle, but I can see them in person. So just going to sort of draw those in, make sure you guys can see them. Is that a little better? Again, you don't have to do this step, guys, unless you can't see it, unless you want to sort of highlight your own lines and make them a little clearer for you to paint in. It's totally up to you. I'm just doing it because I want you guys to be able to see on camera where my lines are as we continue painting our robin. It is not necessary for the painting. And I'm showing it really lightly so it's easy to paint over still, just so you guys are able to see it as well as I can.
And if you have any questions, be sure to comment, let us know,
Yeah.
and I'll let Jessie know so she can answer for you.
Yeah, we've got Lindsay here in the studio. You guys probably know Lindsay from Lunch and Learn and from all the things. Yeah, please feel free to pop questions or comments into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. All right, so hopefully you guys can see that a little better. Now you'll be able to follow along with me as I'm painting inside my little robin here. Okay, so now that we have our little robin painted, we are going to do a little bit more mixing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my number 12 flat brush. This is the smaller of my two flat brushes. So anything you've got like this, if you've got a 1/2 inch flat or a 1/4 inch flat, that works as well. And I'm going to just dip in a little water to soften it. And I'll pick up some wicker white. And then I want just a touch of blue, just the tiniest bit of blue. We're going to just sort of tint it. So even that's a little bit too much. I'm going to grab some more white. I think I had some blue in my white to start, so let me get some fresh white. So I want it to be just the tiniest bit cool. We want it to still look white, but just be a little bit cooler than our just pure wicker white. So as you can see here, it's different than our original white, and that's kind of what we're going for, just a touch cooler. And whenever I mix paint with my brush, I always like to rinse my brush off. I don't want to have that much paint in my brush when I am painting. Alright, so what we're going to use this color for is we are going to paint sort of the underside of our little robin here. So this nice, really super pale blue color, we're going to use that, and we're just going to fill in sort of the little belly area of our robin. And so we have these little details here that kind of look like feathers, so you can kind of go around those details. You can use a smaller brush if you prefer. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. You can use a liner brush to get into those areas if you feel more comfortable. It's totally up to you. But we are just going into these little areas. We're painting the little underside of our robin. Just sort of as carefully as we can. Okay, so there we have it. We have our nice little white belly on our robin. And if you feel like you need to, you can go back and do a second coat once it dries. Okay, go ahead and rinse my brush off. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint the tail of our robin. So to do that, we're going to grab some just pure true blue. I still have my number 12 flat brush. Again, feel free to use a smaller one if you're more comfortable with that. We're going to use just our pure true blue. And you can see now I wanted to make sure this area in the center was a little bit lighter than the sides, because otherwise this true blue that we're painting on our robin would just completely disappear into the background. Of course, that's not what we want. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to use my just regular true blue, not mixed with anything, and my number 12 flat brush to just carefully fill in the little tail here. And I want to make sure I cover up my outlines. Again, you don't have outlines on your painting because I just did those so you guys could see my lines a little better as I go. But I do want to make sure I cover those up. So if you did go back and trace over yours too, just for yourself, just so you could see it better, make sure you cover up any outlines that you painted in. Alright, we have our cute little blue tail there. And I'm going to add a little bit of blue to the underside of his wing here. So if you look in our final painting, we've got a little bit of blue right on the underside of his little wing. So we are going to paint that in as well. And this is, again, just true blue. Just going to wipe my brush off. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint just sort of the top half of his body. So this is also blue. Again, if you're looking at the final painting, he has a lot of blues going on in this painting, which is really fun. It gives us a chance to mix and to kind of learn about the different values. So for this one, I'm going to grab some blue. True blue again, of course, and I'm going to put just the tiniest bit of white. So I want it to be just a little bit lighter than the tail. So I always start with a little, and then I add a little more if I need it. And we don't want it to be super light because, again, we don't want it to blend in with our background, but we do want it to be just slightly lighter than the tail, so that way you can kind of see, it kind of distinguishes the tail from the rest of the body. We don't want it all to blend together into one shape. So again, I'm just adding a tiny bit of wicker white to my true blue. And this is going to be for the top half of our robin's body. You can see I'm just adding a little bit more as I go if I need it. But that's kind of the color I'm looking for. Again, it's a little bit lighter than our just pure true blue, but it's not super light. So I'm going to use this color to paint in sort of this top area, the top of the wing and the head and this area, not the chest. We're going to paint that a different color, but just the top area of our robin. And again, if you feel more comfortable using a smaller brush, feel free to do so. I'm actually going to grab my liner brush to kind of, I want to cover up that white line, of course. I said I don't want to have that white line. That was just for teaching's sake. So So there's just a really subtle difference between the color of the tail and the rest of the robin's blue areas, but you can distinguish it. We're using a tiny brush because we have a tiny bird. It's very delicate. And we get just around the face. Again, I switched to my #1 liner brush. Make sure I leave that eye. We're going to paint that a different color. Okay, so now we have all of that blue filled in, which it looks really nice. I'm going to have nice clean edges. Okay, he's looking cute, guys. So we're going to let that dry for a second. We're kind of going to let our robin sort of chill for a second. We're going to let that blue dry. I don't want to go in with the orange yet because if you remember earlier, when you mix blue with orange, you get brown, and that's not what we're looking for. So, like I said, we're going to let that dry before we start trying to add some orange in. And we're going to start focusing on our leaves and our roses. So make sure my brushes are clean. I left one in here. Bad habit. And I'm going to put some of my classic green on my palette. So again, this is just sort of a grassy, leafy green color. If you don't have this color, you can always mix your true blue with some yellow and you'll get something similar. So again, I've got my classic green and I'm going to grab my, I'm going to grab my #1 liner brush and we're just going to start drawing in some leaves. By draw, I mean we're just going to sort of start outlining some leaves and then of course we'll fill it in. So you can make your branch as full, you can make it sort of sparse if you want it to be more of a wintry branch. This is kind of up to you. It could be more spring or more winter, depending on how many leaves and the color of the leaves and whether you add the roses or not. Again, you can kind of personalize this painting and make it more unique. So I'm going to add some leaves up on this branch here. So I'll add, and I'm just going to do a very classic leaf shape, as you can see. Super classic leaf shape. It's kind of just like an eye shape. Super simple. I'm going to start putting some of these leaves. I'm going to keep them all around the same size. There, I'm going to add a couple here. Maybe I'll add some leaves here. Wherever you feel like you need a little bit of fullness or you want a little pop of color, you can add some leaves. Or if you feel like you want to put a rose there later, I would recommend adding a leaf. Because usually when there's roses, there's leaves that are supporting them. Add some leaves up here by the tail, just to kind of balance it out. I don't want to have all of the stuff going on over here, so we'll put a couple little leaves down here to sort of balance out our painting. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Again, really simple, just use the tip of my liner brush to paint these little leaf shapes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take the same color, and we're going to go back and we're just going to fill them in so they're solid. So they're not lines anymore, they're nice shapes. So I'm just using the same #1 liner brush, and I'm just filling in my leaves. We're just filling in our leaves with some classic green. That looks pretty good to me. I'll go ahead and rinse my brush off. And the next color we're going to use, we're going to start adding some highlights to give our leaves, they look pretty flat right now. They look like kind of like little green footballs. So we want to give them a little more dimension and make them a little brighter for our painting. So to do that, we're going to grab some lime green, which is a really pretty, fun, bright green color. And put some of that, on our palette. Shake it up a little. There we go. Put some lime green on our palette, and I'm going to grab my number 1 liner brush again, same one we were just using. I'm going to pick up some lime green, and I'm just going to do big strokes of the lime green on each of my leaves, and I'm going to focus on the top half. Because of course, if you guys are familiar with painting, if you've been painting a long time or drawing or doing art of any kind, you'll know about light sources. So wherever the light is, that is going to be the lighter side of our, whatever shapes are in your painting. So if it's a bird, a leaf, a building, a vase, a flower, whatever it is, wherever the light is coming from, that's the side that's going to be the lightest on your object. So we're going to assume that this bird is outside and the light is in the sky. Of course, it's going to be the sun, and it's coming downwards. So the top part of each of our leaves are going to be the lightest part. And the lightest color we're using is our lime green. So we're just going to put our light lime green strokes on the top part of each of our leaves. So again, nothing fancy, just making a quick little stroke on each of my leaves to give it a little bit more dimension. And you could go back if you wanted to and kind of blend it in with the darker green. You can even add some more dark green of the classic green if you need to. It's totally up to you, or you can just leave that sort of bold stroke and make it a little more graphic. Totally up to you. You can see here on the top ones that are kind of pointing up, I did 2 little strokes there because that would be the top part of our leaf. Okay. I'm going to blend it in just a little bit. So I like the way those are looking. Go ahead and I'm going to rinse my brush off. So now, just like before, we were going to let our blue dry. We kind of moved on to the branches. We're going to let our leaves dry before we paint the roses, and we're going to move back to our bird, so back to our robin. So that said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab our number 1 liner brush, and we're going to pick up some of our pure orange. So I still have some on my palette from when I mixed brown earlier. So if you need to add some to your palette, go ahead and do so now. And we are going to paint in the chest of our little robin here. So our robin has a beautiful bright orange chest, so we are going to fill that in. And again, guys, I'm always suggesting a good sized brush, but really whatever brush you feel more comfortable with. If you want to use a larger brush or a smaller brush or a flat brush, if you just want to do something different than me, by all means, do whatever you are comfortable with. Just because it's the most comfortable brush I want to paint with doesn't mean it's the same for you. So I'm just filling in this pretty orange. Kind of hard to see, there's a little bit of a glare, but it's really pretty next to the blue. So like I said before, we mixed our blue and our orange to get brown because they're complementary colors. But since they're complementary colors, they look so pretty together. They are just really bright and striking. So a lot of people like to use complementary colors in their artwork because it's just really bright and fun looking. Red and green are like that, which is obviously Christmas colors. Purple and yellow are great together. So just something to think about when you're planning out your next painting. And it looks really bright to me. Go ahead, and I'm going to rinse my brush off. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix some brown again. So I need some brown for the feet and for the beak and the eye. So we're just going to use a little bit of a darker color. If you want to do a black eye and black feet, totally up to you. But I didn't include black in our color palette tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix some super dark brown to paint those areas. So again, if you remember, it's going to be some true blue and some of our pure orange. We're going to mix those two together. And I want it to be a little bit cooler than before, so if you remember before, we added a little bit more pure orange towards the end because I was trying to warm it up a little. But for this one, I want it to be a different color than the branch, so we're going to keep it with more blue. So it's a little bit of a cooler brown, which I like. Rinse my brush off a little. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint in my little bird feet. He's got cute little feet. And I'm going to paint in the bird's beak. Just ever so carefully. I'm just using the very tip of my brush, kind of like a paint by number. I'm just going to paint in that little area. And then, of course, I don't want to forget the eye. So I have this cute little eye on my bird. And this is a little something that Andy Jones reminded me of. So if you guys are fans of Andy's, this is a good tip that he reminded me of recently. Whenever you're painting birds, the eye should always be on the same level as the beak. So the eye shouldn't be higher. Whenever you look at a bird, just take a look at it the next time you see a bird, and the beak is always level with the eye. So just keep that in mind for the next time you're painting a bird. If you feel like maybe the face is looking a little wonky, if it's not looking realistic to you, make sure that the beak and the eye are on the same level, and that might be your problem. So it kind of, just a little tip for you guys. Another tip from Andy Jones.
That's a really good tip. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have put the eye higher, so that's really smart.
Exactly. So a lot of little fun things you can learn along the way in your art journey. Okay, make sure my brushes are clean. So now our green is still a little bit wet, so I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a hairdryer before we start painting our roses, because I don't want to get the green into my pinks. So I'm going to go ahead and hit it with my hairdryer. Nice and dry now. So for our roses, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna grab some of my baby pink, which is just really pretty, just kind of how it's described. It's a nice baby pink color. And like I said, if you don't have this color, hopefully you'll have the basics, so you'll have red and white. So I would put some wicker white down, and then I would put just a touch of red. You really could even probably use your bright pink if you've got that, and mix it with white, and you'll get a nice similar pale pink color. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my number 12 flat brush. So any smallish size flat will do. I'm going to pick up some pink, and we're going to just paint tiny circles where we want our roses to be. So if you want to practice on a piece of paper or practice on your palette, you can do that. A lot of people get really nervous about circles. And it's because everybody wants them to be perfect. It's really obvious if a circle isn't perfect because it becomes an oval or some other shape. So we want them to be nice and round. So it's good to just sort of practice a little bit. Make sure you have a good sort of grip on your brush. So here, I'll show you how I do mine. I start at the top, and I pull to the left, and then I pull to the right. So you get these nice little rose shapes. So pull to the left, pull to the right, and you get these really round little circles. Pull to the left, pull to the right. And I encourage you to practice a little. If you've got some scrap paper nearby, some junk mail or something, go ahead and practice on it. Left and right. And just sort of practice, just sort of twirling your brush to the left and right to get these cute little circles that we're going to be using for the shapes of our roses. Alright, so now that I've practiced a little, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start adding some roses to my painting. So I want to have a nice rose right here. So we'll do just as we did. Pull to the left, and then go to the right. And I kind of want to have another one here maybe. Left and right. And of course I'll have some up on this branch here, a few clusters of roses. These will be right next to each other. You can make them larger or smaller. Just grab a smaller or larger round brush. Maybe I'll do another little one here. Just a little bit tinier. And then maybe I'll put one more guy over here. I just am trying to keep my painting balanced. I don't want to have them all in one spot, so try to spread them out a little. Maybe I'll put another little rose here. Okay, just fill it in a little bit more. Alright, so that's enough roses for me. And again, this is another opportunity to personalize your painting. You can do as many or as few of these roses as you'd like. So I feel like my orange is looking a little bit transparent. You guys can see here on the camera it looks super brown. In person it's more orange than it is on camera, but it could use a second coat. So the reason that it needs a second coat is because some pigments and paints are just more transparent than others. Some are very opaque, like white, and any color that has white, so this pink went down really nice in one coat. But some warmer colors like oranges, yellows, reds, sometimes those can be a little bit transparent. So that's kind of what's happening here with our orange on our bird. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to add another quick coat to that. And that's because we were painting over blue. So if we were painting over white, we probably could get away with one coat. But since it was over sort of a blue color, we can see that blue coming through and it's looking a little brown. And I really want my little chest on my bird to be super bright orange. So I'm just going to go ahead and add another coat, and then I'm going to hit it with my hair dryer.
And Joanne wants to know, could the bird color be changed to red?
Absolutely, that's a great idea. You can totally transform this. Feel free to use this template and take a pencil and change it to anything you want. It could be a cardinal, maybe add that little feather it's got up top and paint it red. It can be a blue jay. This can kind of be, it's kind of a generic looking bird, so it can be transformed into a lot of different kinds of birds. I love that idea. That is a great idea. All right, so I'm gonna hit with my hair dryer. So that's good enough for now.
June says this is so cute it would look adorable in a nursery.
Oh, it would. Yes. I love that idea. Oh, that'd be so
amazing.
cute. You could even do like pastels, like make all the colors a little lighter. That's adorable. Great idea. Okay, cool. So we are kind of coming up on some of, in my opinion, the fun parts. I always like, if you've painted with me before, I really like adding a bright pop of color to kind of surprise you sometimes. A lot of times it's sort of non-traditional or untraditional, so feel free to leave your painting here. You can, or we're going to add some more to the roses, but aside from that, you can feel free to leave your painting here. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some of my bright pink all over, and it's going to give the painting sort of like a really fun, vibrant feel to it. So I'll show you what I mean. Again, I've got bright pink. I'm going to put some of that on my palette. And I'm going to grab my #1 liner brush. And like I said, we'll start with the roses. I'm going to pick up some of the bright pink, and we're going to add the little textures inside our roses. So we're going to make sort of little C's on the inside, and that's just going to sort of represent the petals and give you an idea that these roses are really layered. So a C here, and they're going to kind of be overlapping each other. A C there. I'm using the very tip of my brush. C there. You can even add some more light pink if you want to look a little more blended. I'm going to keep adding that here. So I'm just going to keep doing C's, larger and smaller, sort of inside of each other to look like little roses here. Just a really simple way to paint little roses for a painting. Not terribly realistic, but just sweet little details. And again, you can feel free to grab some of your baby pink and sort of blend it a little more if you prefer that look. Totally up to you. Or you can use a more toned down pink for this. If you have like a magenta or something of that nature, feel free to use that too. I just really like this hot pink. You can use little petal shapes, making it look like it's got lots of layers. Okay. So I'm going to wipe my brush off a little, and we're going to continue adding pink to our painting. So I'm going to move on over to my bird here, to my little robin, and I've still got my #1 liner brush, and I'm going to add some pink highlights to him as well. And it really would just kind of tie the painting together. If you look at our final image, you can see there's lots of pinks, and it just sort of like pulls it all together and makes the whole painting look really unified. So I'm going to add some pink to the chest. So I'm just going to go right on the edge here and add a nice big stroke of that bright pink color, which is really fun. Kind of makes it pop. And I'm going to add a little highlight to the beak. Don't forget we talked about highlights, so we're kind of using a a non-traditional highlight color here, but we're gonna go towards the top of things to make it look like the sun is shining on it and it's reflecting pink. So I'm gonna do some on the top of the bird's head here, kind of going down the back. And again, this is just a really fun little detail to add to kind of make your painting pop. I'm gonna add some to the little wing here to sort of differentiate that wing. Just a little line here and there. And I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to add a little bit of pink to my leaves. I told you it's going to be kind of non-traditional, but it's just a really fun, bright way to, I don't know, just make this painting a little more impactful. Just going back over where I did my highlights with my lime green, and I'm adding a little stroke of pink. Just kind of ties it all together. And I'm going to add a little bit of pink to my branch even, right on the top of each of my branches. It look a little more dimensional as well. Got a little too much paint on my brush, so I'm going to rinse it real quick. And then I'm going to add a little bit, make sure my brush is nice and dry. I want to add a really tiny dot to my bird's eye. So I want a little tiny highlight in my bird's eye. So I'm going to pick up my brush and I'm going to twirl it on my palette. So you can see here I'm twirling my brush, and the reason I'm doing that is I want to get a nice sharp point to make a tiny little dot. So I make my little tiny highlight there. Boop. Oh, maybe a little brighter. There, a nice highlight there. And then I'm going to rinse off my brush. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my number 12 flat brush. And I'm not going to put it in water. I'm actually going to try to dry it off as best I can because I'm doing a little bit of a dry brush technique. And of course, it's got a little bit of water just because you've been painting with it. If you've got a fresh, small flat brush, you can go ahead and grab that. But I'm just going to do my best to get as much moisture out of my brush as I can. So I'm just kind of pinching it with a dry paper towel, kind of pinching it to sort of absorb some of that moisture into the paper towel. Just try to get it as dry as you can. Okay. So, the reason I wanted this dry brush, so I'm going to dry it out, kind of fluff it a little. We're going to pick up some of our bright pink again, and I'm going to wipe some of it off. So I'm going to pick up some, and then wipe it off, and we're going to add some highlights around the edges. Again, we're just trying to make this painting really fun, really bright for the new year. So I'm just going to start at the edges, and I'm going to pull inwards. And again, I have very little paint on my brush. So if you guys can see that there, see how little paint there is? I'm going to pull in. And again, I'm picking up some paint and then wiping some of it off. And I'm just sort of pulling into my painting here. And it just gives it a really fun sort of frame all around the edges of our painting. And I'm kind of going to focus on the corners. And you can do as much or as little of this as you'd like. You don't even have to do pink. You can do a different color. Or you can just leave it off. You could do white even if you want it to just be a little more traditional. That is totally fine. It is up to you.
Jody has a question.
Yeah.
Jody would like to know, do you go back and rewash your brushes when you're all done?
Sometimes, if I don't feel like I did a good enough job sort of cleaning my brushes as I go, I'll go back with like a brush cleaner. Plaid makes a really great brush cleaner called Brush Plus, and I highly recommend it. It's my favorite brush cleaner. It's also great for cleaning paint out of clothes. So if you're ever messy like me and you get some paint on your jeans or something, go straight to the sink and wash some Brush Plus into it, and that'll get the paint right out. So yeah, if I feel like I wasn't rinsing it well enough as I go, I will sometimes give it a nice thorough wash when I'm finished painting. Definitely a good habit to get into. You definitely should. To keep your brushes nice and clean and soft, and they'll last much longer. And again, I'm just going all the way around the edges. You can do as much or as little pink as you'd like. Totally up to you. Just a fun way to add a little more character to this painting.
Allison wants to know, would it be better to use a palette knife for the highlights on the edges?
You totally could. If you use a palette knife, I think you would get a lot more paint going on. You could sort of drag it around the edges. That would be pretty. But if you smeared it in, you'd get really big layers of paint. So I just kind of want it to be like a soft little, like dry brush effect. I want it to be a little more transparent than that. But I love that idea. If you want it to be really, really bright, I think it's a great idea to use a palette knife. Why not? Okay, guys. So that is it for our Rosy Robin, our first painting of the year, our first Let's Paint Live of 2021. So I hope you guys had fun. When you're finished with your painting, make sure to post it, hashtag Plaid Craft, so we can see your painting. And if you're not already a member, we've got a great Facebook group right here on Facebook. You can search Let's Paint with Plaid. And we've got an awesome group. We've got thousands of members in there. And it's all just people who love painting. So whether you've been painting for your whole life, or if you just started painting today and this is your first painting, it is the group for you. So there's lots of people to talk to, lots of great people to ask questions to. Everybody's really supportive and everybody's constantly posting their artwork. So I highly recommend that you join that group. I also want to show you February's Let's Paint Live. So this is a fun one. It's going to be just in time for Valentine's Day and for Galentine's Day. So we're going to mix it up a little. And we have 2 mini paintings we're going to do. So we're going to do 2 paintings in one night just because they're a little bit small. So it's great to do with your Valentine or to do for your Valentine or your Galentine. It makes a great little gift. So keep an eye out for the event listing for this one on Facebook. And again, that's the first Thursday of February at 7:30 p.m. right here on the Plaid Facebook page. And we'll see you then, guys. Happy New Year.